you have on.
Thank you.
Who
Try to
picked it?
match you, African wear.
My
Trying to match you.
Africanacity.
Yes, my Africanacity. Yeah,
Oh, that's good. That's
I
good.
love this. Thank you, Kwame.
But how's the week been?
Fantastic. It's been rainy, it's been cloudy, but we've done some good medical work, and we were happy to welcome a new addition into the family. And Kwame, imagine when your brother's wife has to have a baby in your hospital.
Whoa.
And then there's a lot of tension, a lot of pressure,
I can imagine. I can imagine.
So that happened over the weekend,
Wow.
So, but then you get to show your family firsthand what you can do for
Yeah.
them. So, one way.
School na yedo ko eni
Yeah, So congratulations to Kwesi and Akosia.
Oh,
They
beautiful.
welcomed the beautiful baby boy Kwame. Kwame Udinebi.
Hey, honestly, we have a boy.
Our boy, So yeah.
Oh, that's great.
It's been exciting for all of us, and we thank God that mother, baby are fine.
Yeah.
So he gets to also enjoy some paternity leave. Say yeah, so yeah, pre-me too, no. Father's
paternity.
leave. But yeah, today,
Leave Lydia, I bet you.
But
yeah.
Right.
Anyway, so I'm happy you're here. We get to do part 2 of the conversation on arthritis.
Right.
Last week was very informative, and actually, we had lots of messages that I really couldn't read. Even after the conversation as well, some of our friends reached out with their issues regarding
I did get quite a
arthritis.
number of follow-ups
Yes.
as well.
There's one that I would like to share with you from one of our friends.
Right, sure.
Who says, I listened to your discussion on arthritis with the doc and have a question for next week's presentation. So I thought I'll share it with you. She says, I was diagnosed with RA, and that's, I'm sure, rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
RA about 6 years ago. Now, 2 years after having my first child. The pain and difficulty in walking, etc., got worse after my second child about 2 years ago. I'm doing much better by the grace of God. My question is, I've been seeing a rheumatologist all this while, but was referred to see an orthopedic surgeon for an injection in my foot at one point. Now, during my consultation with him and after listening to the history, he suggested I do not have any more children, linking the development to childbirth. My rheumatologist, however, was hesitant in linking the two. It would be grateful if doctor can give me his opinion, that is, if there's a correlation between childbirth and rheumatoid arthritis. Thank you.
Right. So good afternoon to all our listeners, and it's good to be here another Wednesday. Last week, Kwame, as you rightly pointed out, we started a conversation about arthritis. And because we had a young lady reaching out to us, talking about pain in multiple joints in the body. So I decided that, okay, why don't we explore that umbrella term arthritis? So we looked at basic biology. We did some biology 101 about the joint.
Yep.
So arthritis is an umbrella term that we use in describing any joint pathology. So any problem, disease condition that affects the joint, we would use that umbrella term arthritis to describe it. Then there are different categories of arthritis. So a joint is the junction between two bones, two or more bones will form a joint. But then it's not only the bones that form the joint. We looked at other components, about 7 or 8 different components depending on the type of joint. You've got this cartilage, which is a whitish, crunchy substance that caps the ends of the long bones in the joint. We call it the articular cartilage. Then you also have something we call a joint capsule. Then you have something we call a synovial membrane. Then you've got fluid in some of the joints as well, produced by the synovial membrane, which is a lining of the joint capsule. So a joint is very complex, and those of us who love sports, Kwame, I know you love football and you love tennis. So most of the time, the injuries, I think it was Thibaut Courtois, who had an injury. He had an ACL.
An injury. ACL, yeah.
Yes. anterior cruciate ligament injury that refers to the knee joint. So the joints are very, very complex, and it goes beyond just the bone, and it can give us a lot of different challenges. There are three main types of arthritis that we wanted to look at, and the one we looked at last week was osteoarthritis, the wear and tear age-related arthritis. We talked about that last week. So this week, and again following up on this particular message that we got about RA, which stands for rheumatoid arthritis. And Kwame, I'm sure you've heard it time and again. People say me rheumatism number. Rheumatism. So it's a common term that we use in our Ghanaian society, rheumatism, to refer to recurrent bone or joint pain. Then we put all of it together. So when sickle cell individuals have bone pain crisis, I will still say rheumatism. If somebody gets the arthritis, which is a joint and not a bone problem, we'll still call it the rheumatism. So hopefully by the end of today's discussion, we'll be able to really settle it in our minds what we mean by rheumatism. So the second group that we want to talk about today is what we call the inflammatory arthritis. So osteoarthritis is the first group. Then we have the second group we call the inflammatory arthritis. And the prototype, so there are a number of different entities, but the prototype is something, or the prototypical disease is something we call rheumatoid arthritis, RA. Rheumatoid arthritis. Because of COVID, a lot of us know a lot about the immune system. The immune system is a very complex system of proteins or antibodies that protect us from foreign intrusion. So it's your body's way of identifying self, and by being able to identify self, it's able to identify anything that is foreign. So there's a reason why we don't just take blood from one person and give it to another person, but we carry out some tests to see whether or not it is a match before we would give it out. There's the same reason we do that for organ transplant. So for example, if you're going to do a kidney transplant, we want some member of your family we share some amount of DNA with to be able to do that successfully. So the immune system is responsible for that thing. It recognizes foreign things that are foreign and attacks those foreign things. It does that by being able to recognize itself and distinguish self from foreign, and then will attack it. The Kwame say yatini ekos wo Niger for no. Soldier for no mo Niger no. Almost move to airspace no. So if they find anything that in that airspace, they're probably going to attack it. You can think about the immune system in that way. That anything enters your body, it's been programmed to recognize self. Rheumatoid arthritis is a kind of arthritis or a joint problem that occurs when your immune system attacks itself. Unfortunately, it no longer recognizes that particular joint or the joints in question as part of itself.
What confusion is that?
Kwame just said they will cry my cow. You feed this dog, you give it water, you play with the dog, and then one day you come back home and then the dog attacks you.
Oh, Bobby.
Come there for the Bobby. You know, depending on the nature of the attack, you may even put the dog down. You know, so that's exactly what I want people to think about when we talk about autoimmune diseases. So rheumatoid arthritis is a joint problem that we doctors would label as an autoimmune disease. And autoimmune diseases share one common theme, which is that your immune system does not recognize itself. And therefore, anything it doesn't recognize as self, it will classify as an intruder and therefore attacks it to destroy it. So there's a component of some of the joints called the synovial membrane. So this is a very thin membrane that lines the inside of the joint capsule. So there's sort of like a ring around some of the joints, and the inside of it, this capsule, you have this very velvety, smooth, thin layer, which we call the synovial membrane, and it produces fluid that lubricates the joint. So Kwame, your elbow joints, your wrist joints, some of the joints in your hands, your hip joint, and some of the joints in your neck are examples of joints that have this particular anatomical description that I have put out. Meaning it has a capsule which is lined by a membrane that produces fluid to lubricate the joint. Because take the hip joint, for example, bears weight. We use it for a lot of almost everything, that we do. So that joint needs to be greased properly, and you've got this fluid doing that. Well, it is that synovial membrane that is attacked by your immune system, destroying it. And then you develop what we call rheumatoid arthritis.
But why does it just get up and all of a sudden it doesn't recognize another part of the body?
We find the answer to that question, you get a Nobel Prize. You find the answer to that question, Nobel Prize, you get it, bam.
Into research,
right, so that is the $1 million question. That is where a lot of research is happening. It even took us quite some time to be able to now categorize that type of problem, that type of. So we tend to classify diseases in terms of the pathophysiology, the how the disease comes about. So we have cancers as one group, we have infectious diseases as another group. Now we've put these things, we've now recognized these things, and we've now put them in one basket as autoimmune diseases. There are quite a number of them. Those who suffer from type 1 diabetes, for example, it's an example of another autoimmune disease where this time round your immune system attacks the pancreas and destroys it, preventing it from producing insulin, which you need to be able to regulate your glucose. So these conditions are varied. So rheumatoid arthritis, although it is a chronic condition, meaning it will stay with you for years, it is generalized and not only affects the joints, primarily the joints of the hands and feet, but it is a systemic disease, meaning multiple organs are involved. So it is not just a joint problem. Most of the patients have problems with blood. Blood vessels, they are anemic, they have a fever sometimes, and so on and so forth. So other organs, such as their skin, their heart, their lungs, and even their eyes, can all be involved in this particular medical condition. So I want everybody to know that when we talk about Ari, and I'm sure our friend who sent in the message, it's not just a joint problem that she has. I'm sure she would complain about fatigue on minimal exertion. They're always tired and all of that. So that's all part of it.
So is this to suggest that there are no external triggers or there are no lifestyle, things that we do to, get you to have a rheumatoid?
Thanks for bringing that up. Indeed, there is. We have realized that there are some triggers for this immune system recognition that has happened, and some of the triggers are mainly external triggers. Cigarette smoking, for example, has been put down as one of the triggers. Infections of all sorts, viral infections, bacterial infections. So if you have a boil, you have an infection. If you have candidiasis of the mouth, candidiasis of the vagina, it's an infection. If your ears have liquid coming out of it, it's an infection. You can have a sore throat, it's an infection. So infections across board are also known to be triggers. And then even trauma, any form of trauma, trauma from a road traffic accident, trauma from, today somebody was telling me that a son has been kicked somewhere in the groin, the 18, and it hurts a lot. And I was like, oh yeah, so that's an example of trauma. So trauma generally, these are external triggers, and it would cause the immune system's recognition capabilities, to be affected, and then it provokes that attack on the system. So Kwame, that's what happens. What are some of the signs and symptoms? How would I know, or what will suggest to me that I need to talk to my doctor, because probably this might be rheumatoid arthritis? Usually it's a joint problem, so that's the first thing. The symptoms are usually episodic, or they are gradually progressive.
No, I said an episode.
Like it comes in episodes.
Ah.
It comes in episodes. So you would have it goes away. I had this pain in my wrists, on my knuckles, 2 or 3 days, then it resolves. Then probably a month later, 2 weeks later, you have the same thing again. You cast your mind back, you realize that, this thing happened a couple of weeks back, it happened a couple of months back. Why has it happened? So most of the time, it starts with the level of pain being one that most people would sweep to one side. Most people would ignore, and that's what we mean by it's insidious in onset, and then they have vague pains. Then they'll come and tell you, doctor, I don't feel fine. The general malaise. Doctor, I don't know exactly what it is. They can't put the finger on it, but then they'll tell you that they don't feel well. Then you'll have what we call the joint inflammation. I think last week I defined inflammation here. Pain, swelling, warmth around the place where you experience the pain. And then if you are light-skinned like me...
Yeah?
Okay, then if you are light-skinned like who?
Okay, don't do name like you and I, we are not part.
Okay, like Philip.
Oh, wow. And then Philip, you're light skin. You are light skin. You are Bruni.
So if you are light skin, then you can have some redness, changes in the skin color. So the pain, swelling, heat around the place where you have the pain, main characteristics. Then you can have the hips, the elbows, the ankles, the back of your neck, and then also the jaws being the critical areas where you have the pain. Mm-hmm. There are other non-joint related features: weight loss and fever. So unexplained weight loss always has to be investigated. I always say that unexplained weight loss always has to be investigated. A fever is an elevation in the body temperature. Then they may also have some eye problems. If you have any form of eye problem, you just go and see the doctor. There's some problem with the sclera and then the conjunctiva of the eye. You may also have numbness and tingling in your upper limbs and some kind of weakness actually. And because of the neck problem that you're having, you may have this kind of numbness and tingling in your upper limbs. It may be a suggestion. And then anemia. Anemia means that your HB, or what we say blood level, is lower than what we expect for your sex and then for your age. Stiffness, pain upon touch, pain on motion, swelling, deformities of the fingers, restriction of the range of movement of that particular joint are some of the manifestations of the disease.
Okay. If you have any questions, you might send us a WhatsApp on 055-111-1997, or you can call us on 0302-216-541. Now, I got a message from Sarah who says, this is a very painful condition. I suffer from it. It started when I was 19. I'm now 52 and I've lived with this.
Wow. So that there you go. So remember I mentioned that it's a chronic disease.
Yeah.
So 19 to 52. That's 33 years. She's had to live with it. And I like the way she said she's learned to live with it. When we get to talk about the treatment, I'll talk about some of the modalities of treatment. So yes, sorry, but it is painful because I use the word inflammation. So I repeat the cardinal features of inflammation. You've got pain, you've got swelling, you've got warmth at the site of the pain, and then if you are light-skinned enough, you would notice some redness at that site as well. If you find all of these things, we will say the joint is inflamed. Right. Diagnosis is not quite straightforward. And that's why sometimes you may need some specialist doctors. And I think our friend who sent the message mentioned a rheumatologist.
Yeah.
So it's a doctor who has special training and skill in the field of rheumatology. As they deal with these autoimmune, this malrecognition of the immune system problems. We call such doctors rheumatologists. There are not quite a lot of them, but I know one absolutely brilliant doctor who is a rheumatologist, Dr. Ida Day. She's really good at what she does. But your general practitioner will push you in the right direction once he takes a history and performs some preliminary tests. So it's a combination. We don't have one particular test. Kwame, I need to make this point because there's one test that is sort of like the go-to test that a lot of people will jump at, but there isn't one single test that is conclusive. So it's a combination of both the clinical features, what I've talked about, the pain, the deformity, the swelling, and then a set of laboratory investigations, and then we do what we call imaging, meaning we want to look at the joint. Either using an X-ray, you can look at the joint. Using an MRI, you can look at the joint. Using even ultrasound scan, you can examine the joint. All these are imaging modalities. We see the joint structure differently using this, and that's what we mean by imaging. So your doctor will put all of these things together and then come up with a diagnosis.
Okay.
Can it be treated? You're going to have to live with it. Our objective mainly is to focus on the patient's overall general health, nutrition, and elimination of trigger factors. So if that trigger factor, for example, is an infection, then we treat that infection and you realize that your immune system is not being pushed to attack itself anymore. So that's the approach, and that's usually what we call the conservative approach, where we minimize your pain and we allow you to be able to perform activities of daily living. When those with arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, buttoning the shirt or any article of clothing they have to button, it's a problem. Putting on a scarf is a problem. Brushing your teeth, it's a problem. Because in all of these things, you'd realize that you have to move the many joints that you have from your wrist all the way to the ends of your fingers, and it can cause excruciating pain. Physiotherapy is also another treatment modality. It helps to relieve pain in the joint and then also stiffness. Unfortunately, some individuals will come to us already and they have very, very bad deformities of their fingers, such that those prehensile abilities that we should have, ability to hold things, open a bottle, use a spoon or fork, any form of cutlery, hold a pen, all these things become very, very challenging. And if you've got a very good physiotherapist, then the physiotherapist is able to help you deal with all of these functional, anatomical problems. Okay. So the physiotherapy is absolutely important.
Okay.
Your doctor may also prescribe some medicines, and this is where you need, because those medicines are restricted. I can't be allowed to put a patient on some of the medicines that they use because they are very, very powerful medicines. So I would reserve them for the rheumatologist to make those prescriptions.
Okay.
But one of them is chloroquine, for example, that we use. So everybody knows chloroquine to be a malaria drug. But we use it. It has very good results, for example, in patients with rheumatoid arthritis. Okay. And then there are some other complicated ones. Some of them are injections. And our friend told us about being sent to the orthopedic surgeon for an injection. It's a steroid injection into the joint, the affected joint. But since you can have multiple joints involved, sometimes doing so many injections then in itself is a problem. So we'll go for the big ones, maybe the knee joint, if you have a problem there, the wrist joints, then we'll take away the pain in those areas. So that can also be done.
But in our friend's issue, she mentioned the childbirth issue. How?
Right. So she asks pregnancy. Well, yes and no. There's two schools of thought on this particular matter, and it's just an observation that has been made. There are case studies of pregnancy exacerbating the symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis.
Okay.
So the individual is susceptible or has it, but doesn't have a flare-up. They get pregnant and then they get a flare-up. You know, so if that's the situation, that becomes that trigger. This time it's an internal trigger because a pregnancy is sort of like a physiological thing. It's not a disease. It's not something that's coming from outside.
Yeah.
You know, but the immune system behaves funny during pregnancy. We know, for example, during pregnancy, women tend to develop candida infections of the vagina because the immune system takes a dip. So it's not that strong. So actually, some scientists believe that during pregnancy, your immune system is not so strong to attack other parts of the body because pregnancy weakens the immune system.
Okay.
So some of them also think it is protective. So I'm not surprised that one doctor is telling her that, well, it doesn't have anything to do with the pregnancy. And another doctor is saying it is. She has a disease. I will agree with the doctor who says that you may get a flare-up during pregnancy. We see all sorts of things during pregnancy. You may get a flare-up. We've noted some conditions like that. But typically, pregnancy is immunosuppressive. It reduces every woman's immune system. That's why they tend to get candida infections a lot.
Okay.
So since this is an immune system problem, I wouldn't think that should be the thing that triggers it.
Yeah. You know, a lot of pregnant women also get the tingling in the fingers.
Right.
And weakened fingers and upper limbs.
You're absolutely right about that. But Kwame, that is because of something we call the carpal tunnel syndrome. So most people have used that tunnel under their spintex. You know, we've got a similar tunnel that you have some nerves running through on this side, on the undersurface of your wrist.
Also traffic or
A whole traffic will hop.
Okay, all right.
You know, during pregnancy, women get swollen feet, they get swollen faces and all of that. And their hands actually get swollen. Some of them have to take off their rings and all of that. So you get a lot of swelling around the wrist, and then it tightens the nerve that runs in that particular tunnel. And then it gives you tingling and numbness in your fingers. That has nothing to do with rheumatoid arthritis affecting your neck bones and therefore impinging on the spinal cord.
Okay. Essie sent us a message and was asking whether she says that how different is it from osteoarthritis? And I think we talked about it last week.
Right. So osteoarthritis is just a wear and tear.
Yeah.
You know, everybody will get it with age, and also, unfortunately, if you misuse your joint, sports, carrying too much weight and all of that, then you're going to get that. It has nothing to do with your immune system. But rheumatoid arthritis, it's your immune system attacking itself, unfortunately.
Well, she says I have that in my ankle, triggered by a car accident in the ankle about 30 years ago. And
Yes, so we're talking about trauma, fractures occurring into the joint being one of the things that would start an osteoarthritis.
Great. I mean, there are a lot of questions we could have answered, but we run out of time.
We've got a part 3 next week.
Yeah,
because we're going to another category of arthritis next week, the infective one.
There's another one.
There's another one.
Romano, another Roma. Samaba. Okay, all right. Then we'll do a part 3 next week. But for those who want to reach out to you and probably seek more clarification on these conditions, how can they reach out to you, Doc?
Right. So the number is 0501 477 340. Our WhatsApp number is 0501 477 340. We'll continue the conversation on our social media handles as well. Facebook is Medicas Hospital.
Dr. Yao Safo is the CEO of Medicas Hospital, Mampo Equiapim and Medina Firestone.